Hello again. In this video we're going to be talking about this. Now this is the Skywatcher Star Travel 80, often we just call it the ST80. Now this is one of Skywatcher's entry-level telescopes, but don't let that fool you. If you are a beginner, then this is an ideal little telescope just to get started with, and you don't even have to buy an expensive mount or anything. It'll actually work very, very well on one of the camcorder type tripods with the sort of the pan and tilt arm on it and everything, and you'll get some fantastic views of both the moon and the planets, and also a couple of the deeper sky objects with it. Now the thing is that you very rarely see these being parted with, because they actually just grow with you. As you get more advanced and you might buy a bigger telescope, then you may want to mount this on your mount with your bigger telescope, and what that does is it allows you sometimes to just step back from that tighter view that you've got with your bigger scope and just have a look at a wide field view of the area that you're looking at, which can help you sort of, you know, if you've got an object that you're struggling to find, sometimes it helps just to look in a wider field. And again, as you get more advanced, you want to get into astrophotography, it works very well as sort of a more advanced finder, if you like. And then after that, you can even attach a camera to it and use what we call auto guiding, which means that a camera connects to your ST80 and then connects into your telescope mount and will actually track and follow a star as a pinpoint. It's just a lot more accurate way of tracking an object that you're taking an image of. So as I said, it's a fantastic little scope and worth every single penny. And like I said, there's you know, ideal for the beginner, but also the more advanced people. It's just a classic telescope, and you know, it's just made an imprint in sort of the whole astronomical community. Now what we are going to do, as you do get a little bit more advanced, you can do a couple of little modifications to this telescope. Like I said, it's sort of, you know, entry level, and it does have a couple of little faults that as a beginner you won't even notice. As you get more advanced, you'll realise that it has a little bit of what we call chromatic aberration, which means that you may get sort of a small purple or blue halo around points of light, such as stars, on the moon as well, possibly sometimes, and just a little bit of what we call false coloration. Don't let that worry you. As a beginner, half of the time you won't even notice it. It's sort of, you know, as you get more advanced. Now what we can do is a couple of little modifications to the ST80 that actually take away some of these things, so, and that's what we're going to show you in this video. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to blacken the edges of the optics on our ST80, and it's a very, very simple procedure. It will cost you absolutely nothing apart from the cost of a permanent black marker. Now it is a permanent black marker that you want and not paint. It just makes everything a little bit easier, and also a layer of paint is quite a bit thicker than a coating with a black marker, and you know, it can sort of have an effect because the lens elements in these are quite snug, and also you don't want to be messing about with paint. You know, it can get messy. The first thing that we do, as you saw, is I just remove the little shield that's built into the ST80. It just actually pulls off. And you'll see now that we've got a plastic section that's the lens cells. Now what we do is just simply unscrew like so, and at this point you need a micropore cloth or something very, very soft and similar, such as this. Just place it over the top and tip the scope like so, and your lens elements will now come out. Now it's actually what we call an air-spaced doublet, and there's actually two lenses there that are spaced with very tiny little spaces that you might just be able to see there, 3 of them. Now the main thing not to forget when you do this is what order these elements go in, and they're actually not quite symmetrical, so it's something to bear in mind there. Now the thicker one goes nearest to the eyepiece, goes in first. Obviously because it's got the spaces on, you know which way around that one's going to go. Your secondary isn't quite symmetrical. You may see that it's actually a little bit more convex on one side than it is on the other. It's the more convex side that goes towards the spacers, like so. Now all you do is take your permanent black marker and just carefully work around the edges of those lenses, and you can see that mine are already done. Once you've done that, and hopefully you haven't got any fingerprints on there, you want to make sure everything's nice and clean. Now I'm not going to go into sort of lens cleaning because there are other tutorials on the net that tell you exactly how to do it. So to replace these elements now, all we do is take our micropore cloth again, place the lenses onto it and flat on your hand like so. Take your ST80 and just offer it over the top and just ease it in like so, and tip the scope over. If you don't do it that way, you can get where they are such a nice snug fit. If you get the lenses in slightly off square, you can end up getting a little jam, and you know, you're going to struggle a bit then. If that does happen to you, just keep the scope upside down with your micropore cloth and just get somebody to tap the scope a little bit just to loosen them back off again. Now, another important thing to bear in mind is when you screw this section back on, even though it might have been fairly tight when you did take it apart, you don't want it to be tight. What you do is screw that down until you can feel it hit your lenses. Once you've done that, give the scope a little shake like so, just to bed them lenses in, and you know that everything's sitting nice and flat inside there. Again, just touch it up, and it's just got to be so gently holding those lenses in. You know, even a very slight rattle is acceptable. Now, the reason why we do that is because you can introduce something that we call pinch errors. Now, pinch errors are where an area of glass or an optic has pressure put on it. It can be on the outside, it can be anything. You can even create pinch errors by having the clips too tight in, say, a Newtonian, just one clip which are spaced out actually at 1/3. Even having one of those too tight can cause pinch errors. What it basically is that you're introducing a pressure into that glass that puts stress across the glass surface, you know, and even though you might think that it's nowhere near tight enough, it actually is, and it can cause a degradation of your view through your optic. So just ease it off that little bit and you won't get any pinch errors. Next, we're going to go a little bit deeper and do a couple more little modifications to our ST80. Right, again we've got the sort of shroud off the scope, and if you look, you can see that the lens cell is actually held in by 3 Phillips screws. Now, what you can do is, if you take a screwdriver and carefully remove those screws, again making sure that you hold your ST80 vertical, we're just going to remove those 3 screws. Right, once those 3 screws are removed, you can actually remove the entire lens cell like so, place that somewhere safe, and now if we have a look down the tube, you may see what we call a baffle, which is, it's just a metal ring inside. It just helps to stop the reflections on the inside of the scope. Now, under normal circumstances, the inside of the ST80 is painted. What I've done is I've used what we call flock. And if you look on an astronomy site, or you contact an astronomy supplier and ask them about flocking material, what it is, it's a self-adhesive flock material coated a little bit like velvet, and it just prevents reflections occurring inside your tube. You know, if you have a look down there, like I said, they are normally painted black, and it can be improved a little bit because there is just like that, a little bit of reflectivity in there. So I've actually flocked the inside of mine, which is why it actually looks so dark in there. What we're doing is we're preventing any stray reflections. Now also, if you pull the other end off, again it's just 3 screws, look down that end, you can do exactly the same thing. And if there are any little bright shiny screws or anything like that, sometimes it just helps to put a little dot of matte black paint onto those screw heads, and it just prevents those reflections. Now, the next thing that we're going to do with it, because we're going to go even further, is we're just going to fine tune the focusing mechanism on our ST80. Now, normally, again, you would have 3 Phillips screws holding this section together, holding the focusing section on. In my case, I've actually replaced these with little socket-headed bolts. So what we're going to do next is just remove those. Right, I've now removed the 3 screws holding the rear section in, and the actual tube itself now just comes away. And again, if you look, I've also flocked in from that side as well, and I actually used some what we call blackboard paint for painting the baffle itself as well. The actual make that I use for my blackboard paint is called International Paints One Coat Blackboard Paint. It's a very, very matte black paint, and it's water based. It's quite thick and it's very easy to do, and it's quite an handy little thing to have if you get into sort of fine tuning and modifying on your telescopes. So that's that part now finished with. It's been flocked and it's been touched up with the matte black paint and everything. So next we're going to move on to the back end of the scope itself. Now at this point it's going to make things a lot easier if we remove any diagonals and everything, because what we're going to do next is we're just going to fine tune the focusing mechanism on this, just make everything a little bit tighter and take any play out of it. And for that we're going to move into the workshop. Right, as you can see, we've now got this back end of the telescope on the bench, and the first thing we're going to do is to remove these 4 screws that are holding the focuser section in there. So let's just remove those. Okay, once we've removed those 4 screws, we can remove this little plate, and as you can see underneath there's a spring mechanism that just basically holds the focusing sections together, and it's just a rack and pinion system like so. Now what I've done with mine is to remove the existing grease that was already on there and re-greased it, just a thin coat of grease on the rack and on the pinion as it goes in there. Now the grease that I recommend and use, and is actually widely recommended by a lot of people in the astronomy community, is this. It's what we call white lithium grease, and if you take a look at it, it is actually white. Now the brand that I use is by a company called Weld Tight, which is a bit of a strange name for a grease company, as you want it to slide, not weld. But it's actually called TF2 lithium grease, and you can get it in those tubes, those tubs, or you can get it in tubes like this, and it's actually quite cheap. It's very commonly used for bicycles, believe it or not, and if you've got a bicycle shop nearby, the chances are that you'll be able to buy it from there. Now once we've greased that, this will actually just pull straight out, allowing you to sort of grease onto that rack. And if you look inside there, you'll see that the focuser actually runs on a couple of like Teflon bushes, which you can just put a little bit of grease onto your finger and just smear a very, very small amount on there. And then what we're going to do is just put it all back together again. Once we've got that back together, make sure that you get the spring the right way around that holds these 2 sections together, because obviously you're going to have problems if you put the spring in the wrong way around. So that goes like so, and then we're going to put the plate back in. Now once I've put these 4 screws back in, we're just going to do a little bit of fine tuning on the focuser itself, which is something that a lot of people don't realise that you can do. So I'm just going to put these 4 screws back in. Right, now that the 4 screws are back in and everything's back together again, you may find that it feels either a little tight or maybe a little slack on its action. Now I actually prefer to keep mine a little bit on the tight side. It just allows me to make very fine adjustments if I want to, because I actually use my ST80 with a Skywatcher ST80 system, and I just like to be able to just make those very slight adjustments in focus. Now what you do is, if you take hold of your focusing tube and just have a feel of it, if things start to feel a little bit sloppy, what people don't realise is if you look on each side of the focuser lock bolt on the actual focusing section, this is the focusing lock, you'll see 2 small holes. Now what a lot of people don't realise is they are actually Allen key holes. They do have grub screws in there. So if you take an Allen key of the right size, you can actually make slight adjustments to the tension on your focuser and just remove any slop that might be in there, and it just helps to tighten everything up and take any play out of it. And again, you know, just make little adjustments but make it even, you know, do it the same on each side, and just have a twist of your focuser and you know, make little adjustments if need be. And again, try your focuser, but also feel for any movement in your actual focuser tube. Once you've done that, we're going to start to put everything back together again, because basically we've done with the modifications. What you may like to do to take things a little bit further is to actually blacken the inside of your focuser tube itself if you want to, again using the blackboard paint. You know, it just depends on how far you want to take it, or you know, if you're fed up one day and it's cloudy and you just want, you know, something to do, or learn a little bit about how your telescope works and how it's constructed, then you know, it's quite a nice little project to just get on with. Now, like I said, we're going to put all this back together again now, and when we've done that, I'm actually going to show you how to collimate one of these. Now, they don't have any collimation adjustment on the ST80 at all, but you can still collimate it, and that's what we're going to show you next. Right, so now that you've got your ST80 back together again, and minus the dew shield, what I'd like you to have done at this point is just to have left these 3 screws that hold this section to the tube just that little bit loose, and you will notice there's a little bit of play there. Now we can use that to our advantage to just collimate it a little bit. Now, because it is sort of entry level telescope, there isn't actually any proper built-in ability to collimate it, and it's just a little work around this. So as I said, this section you should have just a little bit of play in it. Now I'm going to show you 2 ways to collimate this. I'm going to show you using a laser collimator and also using a Cheshire combination tool. So first of all, let's move on to the laser. What we need to do is make a circle, a disc like this with some tabs on it. Now you can do this in your graphics package if you like. You know, just do a circle that's the right size for the end elements on your telescope. This one's actually too big, and it's just one that I did to just illustrate. But what you need is that circle to be the same size as those end elements. What you're going to do is to use your tabs and bend them over and tape it to that end element on your scope. Now you need to have either, if you've done it in your graphics package, you can put a dot in the centre of the circle, or another way to do it is to place your telescope face down on a piece of paper like so, draw around it and cut out the circle, but leave yourself these little tabs. The next thing you do is fold your circle in half and then in half again, and be very precise about that. You want those halves to be as exact as possible. Next, using a pair of scissors, just snip off that very top corner there. When you open up your circle, you will now have a tiny hole right in the centre of that circle. So fit it over the lens elements, use your tabs to just tape it to the end. Next, take your laser collimator, place it into your ST80 and switch on. Now what you're looking for is that laser point to be hitting that centre in that circle, and you know, whether it's a hole or whether it's a mark, because the laser will actually, it'll project onto your piece of paper anyway, like so. So what we do then is just move this section until we get that laser point in the middle and on the dot or shining through your hole, and then tighten your bolts up, and it's just sort of a crude and simple way of actually collimating your ST80. Now the way to do it with a Cheshire collimator is this. What we do is take your dew shield and fit your dew shield back on. Next, fit your lens cap onto your ST80. Next, take your Cheshire or combination collimation eyepiece, as they're sometimes called, and place that in like this. Now the thing is, you need a very bright light source for this. You know, you either sort of do it inside and with the light directly shining on it, maybe a torch, or even outside and just, you know, move about a little bit, just get enough light down there. What you do, now I'm going to have to take my glasses off for this, is you look down your Cheshire And I don't even have to explain what it is that you see, because if you've got enough light coming in there, you'll see exactly what it is you've got to line up. You see circles, you'll see the cross, you'll see everything. It's just absolutely plain as day. So the same thing again, and an easy way to do it is, if you're in a sitting position, place the scope onto your knee, get your eye to the Cheshire like so, and just make your adjustments. Have your screwdriver or your Allen key in one of your screws at that point, and just sort of move about a little bit. Once you're hitting that point, tighten one, turn it round, and just do the same for all 3 screws until you've got everything lined up. And as I said, using the Cheshire, I don't even have to tell you what it is that you'll see. It's just absolutely plain as day when you look through there what it is that you've got to line up. There's you'll see concentric circles, you'll see your crosshairs, you'll see a reflection of the hole in the end of the Cheshire, and you know, like I said, just line everything up. And that's about it for this one. And it, like I say, it does definitely improve your little ST80. Just helps you to get more out of it. And you know, I hope that you get as much enjoyment out of your ST80 as I do out of mine, because I do absolutely love it. And like I said, that's it for this one. So once again, thanks for watching.